Hey you guys, it's your girl Antoinette, and today we're coming to you with the video, and it's called Migrants Rob Tourists in Central Park. Really? Now they robbing people at Central Park. I mean, how do they expect for New York to make any money without the tourists? I don't get it. I don't get it at all. Like I have said before, New York is just a very popular place. It's very popular and people want to go there. They want like better life. And so like they feel like that's the only way they could be, you know, enjoy themselves in life is to go to New York City. Who wouldn't want to go to the Big Apple? So, but they ain't got to be robbing though. They really don't. I don't know. I don't know. Let's see what all happened. But don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, turn your notifications on so you can see me. And let's get into this video.
This is all what the NYPD is calling a young migrant robbery pattern here in Central Park, concerning for people who live around the park. For officials, it's a public safety issue as well as a...
So a new wave of crime is taking over one of New York's most iconic landmarks, Central Park. And while there's debate over how much the asylum crisis is connected to this recent rise in assaults and robberies, everyone agrees that things here have taken a turn for the worse.
The number of robberies in Central Park has tripled compared to this time last year.
The rise in robberies at least partly blamed on young migrants living in city shelters.
You'll start to see the wolf pack.
Savino says the suspects in these crimes are in large groups, what he calls wolf packs. They take off with things like wallets, phones, and bags.
Oh my God.
I don't tend to come to Central Park at night.
I think we have a lot of, people sleeping in the park.
The string of robberies is connected to young migrant men living in city-run shelters. Groups of suspects, up to a dozen young males at a time, are approaching victims in the park and robbing them.
There's a big group of them, but they're really young. They were like...
I bet that is so freaking scary, like a whole bunch of people just come around you and stuff like that. Like, you don't even know what to do. Even if you did have a weapon, you would be still so scared to even like grab it, because it's like so many people, like all them people being beat you, anything you know, grape you or anything like that. You know, I mean, and I always thought it's been like that. Like, you always couldn't go to Central Park at night, especially, you know, like when all the serial slashing was going on and stuff. So I always thought, was it ever time? I'm pretty sure it was a time that people could go to Central Park and really enjoy themselves, but that ain't been for a long time.
10:30 p.m., which is dark, and it's like a lot of people say don't go to Central Park after the sunset.
According to the NYPD, robberies are up and assault felonies are up.
It's tremendously concerning, and it's a new phenomenon not only to Central Park, but really to the area.
So gangs of asylum seekers are now being blamed for the recent rise in crime taking over Central Park. But what nobody's talking about is that even though the police have made some arrests, thousands of criminals just like these guys are roaming our streets right now because our justice system doesn't think locking anybody up is a good idea, leading many to point the finger at our laws for the reason New York City's ever-rising tide of crime just will not subside. From the shoplifting epidemic taking over our stores and shuttering our businesses, to the moped-riding thieves mugging diners eating outside at restaurants, to the roaming wolf packs, as they're now called, who've infiltrated Central Park, surrounding their victims, stealing everything they have. But there's another element to this that has many New Yorkers on edge, as many of the recently arrested suspects have residences in the city's shelters for asylum seekers. And even though over 200,000 have come through New York on buses from the southern border seeking a better life in America, a small minority of asylum seekers are now using the city's generous offer of free housing and free food as a foundation, not for reaching the American dream, but for reaching into the pockets of New Yorkers to steal their phones and wallets after realizing that Central Park has been left completely unguarded while the NYPD tackles crime elsewhere in the city. And that brings us to the real reason why we now have a crime wave in New York's most iconic park, and why all of this police activity is at best a band-aid solution to a growing problem. Sure, extra police may make the park look safer temporarily, but that's the thing. Our police force is so short-staffed that the cops won't be here forever, which means although their presence here will temporarily force all of this crime to go elsewhere, once once the crime goes elsewhere, the police will have to go over there and deal with it, and there will be nothing stopping criminals from coming back to Central Park. There's a $3,500 reward for information on one of the recent robberies. And the question on many people's minds is, how can a place as gorgeous and iconic and historic as Central Park be turned into a place where we've got these all over the place? And is this really happening because multiple asylum shelters are within walking distance of the park? Or is there something else at play here which is causing the rise in crime regardless? And why is it, with all of the cameras and technology watching this park 24/7, were there no police here when these crimes took place?
Robberies year to date in the park have more than tripled. The rise in robberies at least partly blamed on young migrants living in city shelters.
The mobile command post is here, and the officers will be here every single night until the department deems it's safe.
So now, as you can see, we've got quite a police presence here in the park, complete with the mobile command unit, but now people are wondering, if this is what we need to keep people safe in the park, why wasn't it here already? Well, sadly, the reason for that is the New York Police Department is chronically understaffed. In fact, they lose about 200 officers a month to retirements alone. And before we get to how connected the asylum crisis may be to these recent robberies, you've got to understand that the police that you see here, they were fighting crime waves that had popped up in other parts of town, like the subway, where there has been a chronic crime wave since the beginning of the year. Right now, you've got the National Guard, you've got extra officers down there, and they're making a difference, but the problem is now there are less police for places like Central Park. And you know what else? This approach to securing the park mirrors exactly what's going on in the subway. Because as you can see, all the police are right here by the entrance of the park, which definitely helps people feel safe when they make their way inside of it, just like having police selectively stationed at the entrances of our subway terminals checking bags helps people feel safe enough to get on, even though police aren't ubiquitous throughout the system. But as far as a deep police presence within the depths of the park where some of these robberies have happened, that is not as heavy as what you see right here. It's not like this everywhere, just in this one particular location. The other locations actually have less police cars, which means if the bad guys want to come inside the park, they can just go around this entrance, avoiding the relatively obvious mobile command centers that you see here. Now look, as somebody who's in the park right now, I feel better with all of these police. It does make me feel safe, and if something were to happen in the park, the response time would be a lot shorter than it would be had the police not been here already. But as you're about to see, that might not be enough to make everybody feel safe, because these criminals, they only need a few seconds to commit the types of crimes that have been putting the entire city on edge.
You'll start to see, like I described, the wolf pack.
Savino says the suspects in these crimes are in large groups, what he calls wolf packs, like this mugging on August 1st. He says they take off with things like wallets, phones, and bags.
So you can imagine the feeling.
So right away, this footage, this is extremely frightening, extremely disturbing. But it's important to understand we're talking about a minority of the asylum seeker population that the city is caring for, which is holding at around 65,000 individuals in the city's shelters. However, these attacks and the way they happen are absolutely shocking. You've got this massive group of people marauding through the park, and they surround a helpless, distracted victim and steal everything they have. And these attacks, they're not taking place on these wide roadways where you see this mobile command unit being set up. No, instead, they're taking place in areas of the park like this little pathway right here. It's very narrow. There's not a lot of room to move around. And there are areas of the park where you've got pathways like this very far from where a police car can get to. On these little pathways, you can only move forward, you can only move backwards, and if a big group approaches you, you're going to be surrounded with nowhere to go. Plus, several of the victims indicated that their assailants brandished weapons, or at least claimed to have weapons. And those reports follow reports of gang members infiltrating some of the city's shelters with weapons that they sneak through as food delivery items, which means that these very well may be armed gangsters in this park.
He says many of the suspects in these crimes live in city-run migrant shelters, and their average age is just 15. Assistant Chief Savino said.
So, news reports of teenage gangsters robbing people all over town, that predates the asylum crisis. But the frightening thing about these incidents is that a violent gang from Venezuela may be behind them. The man you see right here attacked 2 police officers in June with an unregistered weapon that he said he got from a gang that recruited him when he moved into one of New York City's asylum shelters. And what this could mean is that the same weapons being
I feel like no sooner they little kids start doing stuff like that, just kick them all out or whatever like that and deport them, or like, well, at least try to help the people who's not doing it. Deport those ones, send them back or whatever like that. They keep their guns or whatever. Like, Go back. Don't keep the gun, take the gun from, don't collect $200 or nothing like that. Get your tail back to where you come from, because it's already enough over here. We already got mouths to feed over here. No. It's not worth all that. No. Go back where you come from.
Being used to intimidate the vulnerable in New York City shelters are now being used to intimidate vulnerable New Yorkers when they're in Central Park. But with all the police presence that you see now, the command centers, the cars, the flashing lights, this will probably tank crime levels in the near future. But people want to know, how long are the police going to be here? Because just a couple of weeks ago, you didn't see this kind of presence of police in the park. Well, the likely answer to that is police will be here while the park remains busy during the warmer weather months. And probably...
Okay, so when it get cold, they gonna go in. And I was so thinking the same thing, like, how long are they even gonna be there? Like, is they gonna be there till at least like 9 o'clock or whatever? You know, like at least like a certain time. But like, I understand that they have to go other places, you know, because crime is everywhere. I get that, but like, can I just have like certain cops or whatever like that? Could they just start? Well, I would say like people who would just want to dang, I'm trying to think of the word, volunteer people. Would the volunteer people like try to come in or whatever and like try to help out, and they pay them something just because, you know, like they are kind of putting their life on the line? You know, like the people that do security and stuff, like they could come out there and kind of like get them, like have like a good bit of them and kind of rough them up or whatever, you know. But then, you know what, they got guns, but I mean, they still got guns with the police officer. I feel like they should get like some little security guards, you know, and try to like help put within stake, like have like 3 or 4 people at a stake or whatever. You know, something like that. Maybe that would help some. So the police just ain't all just necessarily. There's got to be a lot of them. You know, like 2 or 3 policemen could be over there, like patrolling, and while the rest of them still doing all of that, fighting crime in the city, and they just put like some security people in there. I feel like that might be a good idea. Put some security people in there, like set their little booths up and stuff. That's something they could think about.
When you see snow on the ground, you will not see the same number of police cars here, that's for sure. Or they'll end up leaving sooner to deal with another crime wave that pops up somewhere else in the city because there aren't police in that location. That's also very frightening to consider. But the second thing this reveals is that there's a big problem with our shelter system. And in some way, things that are happening there are affecting life everywhere in the city, not just inside those facilities. And if that's the case, people want to know, what is the city gonna do about it? So here we are at the Roosevelt Hotel, a 1,000-room shelter for asylum seekers within walking distance of Central Park, where some of those arrested claimed to be living. But the shocking part is who it was that was arrested and exactly what may have led to them beginning a life of crime.
Were you shocked to find out an 11-year-old was part of this?
I think many of us were shocked, and this is all what the NYPD is calling a young migrant robbery pattern here in Central Park. Concerning.
So it doesn't look like we're talking about adult criminals here. Now, to a lot of people, the idea of anyone living in a former luxury hotel who then decides to go out and commit crime is not a good one. In fact, there's no excuse or justification for stealing whatsoever because it's wrong. People shouldn't do it. But what's complicating things here is the criminals who were caught. They are so young that they may not be capable of making their own decisions with the same agency as a fully grown adult. And observers say the real problem contributing to this is the environment inside the shelter itself. But that raises its own set of controversies because this is one of the better shelters. The former luxury hotels like this and the Row Hotel, which is also within walking distance of Central Park, these are reserved for families, the single adults. They're the ones that live in the gigantic tent facilities where you just have a bunch of beds and large hangar-like spaces. This, you have private rooms, and if you were to rank our various shelters, this and the Row would probably be the best options. Furthermore, many of the families inside shelters like this are eligible for prepaid debit cards, which give $1,400 a month to families so that they can do things like buy food and supplement their nutrition. And what's controversial about this is all of those benefits that people getting here may have access to, those don't leave a whole lot of room for folks to claim hardship as the reason for why they went out and stole things. So why are the people who live here out stealing things?
I'm not really surprised. I mean, they come here, they're desperate, and they don't necessarily get all the help that they were promised, and so, you know, they get desperate enough to start doing, you know, stuff. I mean, it's the young kids too.
I mean, they can't go by what they were promised. I mean, like, that's for, like, people who actually come in here the right way, not people that's just getting picked up by a bus. I mean, like, I don't get that. I don't get that part at all. They can't be promised nothing like that because the people that live here are already not getting it. I mean, so, like, we can't really say too much about that part.
So on the surface, not everybody's going to agree with that take, but it hints at what many say is the real problem. Because even though many in New York say that the red carpet has proverbially been rolled out for many asylum seekers, especially families, a recent investigation has revealed that life inside these facilities isn't the vacation many accuse it of being. In fact, some say that the levels of gang activity inside facilities like this make these more like minimum security prisons than hotels. And now that some of these individuals have been arrested, more information about what's led them to commit these crimes is starting to come out. The mother of one of these suspects was interviewed, and she lives here with her 4 children. And she denies that her son, who was arrested, did anything wrong. However, neighbors who live near them in this building were also interviewed, and they tell a different story. They say that the perpetrator is quite rebellious and often sneaks out of the hotel room at night when his mother is asleep and just roams the hotel by himself at a very young age. And that's a problem because many reports of what goes on in these shelters after hours make them sound like nightclubs. Not exactly the type of place somebody who has school the next morning should be hanging out. And then when you make the connection to the gangs smuggling the weapons inside of these places and you put that together with the fact that some people are running around unsupervised, the idea of someone who is very impressionable meeting some very bad people who steer them in the wrong direction is very possible. And that's likely what's happening. You have people meeting up with gang members, learning how to commit crime. But the person on the news who was interviewed, they make a good point about the desperation that many in the city's shelters are feeling, because there are an awful lot of folks who the city's caring for that moved into these facilities under what some would consider to be false pretenses. In fact, many asylum seekers speak of being told when they moved into the shelter facilities that they would be offered help getting jobs. Yet the only jobs available for many are still delivery jobs, and those are few and far between now that not everyone is allowed to have one. But a lack of employment's not an excuse to commit crime, especially when one's needs are provided by the shelter they live in. However, that information could be taken by those with ill intent and used to manipulate various shelterees into joining gangs, thinking that that is the only future they can have. But this recent wave of crime in Central Park, what we're witnessing here is the product of a lawless environment being allowed to fester inside our shelter facilities by a city that doesn't run them in a safe manner.
So cops are patrolling on foot, they're on horses, they're on bicycles, they're using drones, all to send the message that this will not be tolerated. In terms of the young migrant robbery pattern, what we're hearing is that there's at least 10 cases connected again in the south.
So now we get to the real issue here. The city wants to send the message that it will not tolerate crime. But when every criminal out on the streets goes back to their shelter, they're surrounded by other criminals who are committing other crimes, and nothing's being done about it. What kind of message are they receiving? Because we're tolerating plenty of crime where they live. In these shelters, you have violent gang members with weapons intimidating everyone who lives there. And now people whose parents are unable to supervise them are getting swept up into all of this, creating a terrible situation that hurts the majority of law-abiding asylum seekers in these facilities. But now the question is, what is the city going to do about this? Should they institute a curfew at shelters like the Roosevelt Hotel, just like they have at shelters is in New York's normal homeless system? Would something like that deter crime from happening via gangs at Central Park during the evening and night? And if the city really wants to send a message, what about the idea of prosecuting those who are caught with weapons? It's a 3.5-year minimum if someone's convicted. Yet a lot of times when someone who's caught with a weapon is arrested, those charges get dropped when they face a judge. And why isn't there better security at these places? Yes, there are police that stop by. Yes, there are metal detectors, but once you're inside the facility, perhaps the security apparatus in the hallways and in the stairwells should be upped. Because there are reports that people have been caught in the emergency stairwells, you know, the fire exits of facilities like this, doing things that people shouldn't be doing. And the real question is, are these supposed to be facilities that help people? Who's being helped by an environment of aggressive intimidation that is completely lawless? Especially now that crime is making its way out of the shelters and into parks like Central Park. Now we've got to divert thousands of dollars a day of police resources over to that location to stop that crime wave. And once the police eliminate it, the criminals will have figured out the next place, or path rather, of least resistance, and that's where there will be another crime wave. That's what's been happening for about the last year in New York. And it's a real shame, because what we've got here is a system that is incredibly expensive. These hotels cost millions of dollars a month to run and operate, yet the people inside of them are not benefiting from them the way that they are supposed to. What do you think about all that? How would you stop the crime wave that we've got in Central Park? How would you up security at these shelters that are supposed to be helping the less fortunate? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
I feel like with that, they need to put just more like security guards. Have security guards monitor those places 24/7. 24/7. They need to be up and down those halls. They catch anybody with all those gangs, call the police on it immediately. Get them on up out of here, because they already, some of them are already coming over here illegally and all like that. They need to go back where they come from. That's just what I'm saying. They need to go back where they're coming from if they're going to be acting like that. It's already enough going on in New York with the Central Park and all like that. The Central Park, they need to up security, have like little bases so security guards can be in there to help protect people that actually want to come in there at nighttime. They need to give them the bulletproof vests and all like that. That's what I feel they should do. They could try it, see how it is. If it don't work, then just figure something else out. That's all I can give them at the top of my head like that. That's all I can do for right now. And then I'll think of something else. And then I'll be like, okay, they can do this. But for right now, that's the only thing I can think of. You guys, you can let me know what y'all think of. And I will catch y'all in the next one. Bye, you guys.